Good afternoon and welcome to the CIBHS Peer Leadership Institute webinar series. Today's webinar will be Effective Advocacy as an Employee, presented by Lucinda De Rossi and Deborah Brasher from CASRA. I'm Lisa Smooze, training consultant for PLI and one of your trainers for the Peer Leadership Institute project. I'll be moderating today's session along with Kelly Bitts from CIBHS, who is providing technical support. I am pleased to be joined by our presenters, who will now introduce themselves.
Good morning. This is Lucinda, and I'm here with Deb.
Hello, everybody.
I'm currently the Public Policy Coordinator for CASRA, the California Association of Social Rehabilitation Agencies, which is a member organization made up of agencies across the state that provide psychosocial rehabilitation and recovery services. And many of those agencies are peer-run organizations and or hire peers. Debbie and I have, for the last 25 years, worked toward the inclusion of peers and family members in the workforce, all the way from dealing with or trying to manage system change to the hiring, training, and retention of peers and family members. So we are very pleased to be joining you today for this webinar. And now I will turn it over to Debbie, who will begin the content.
Well, good morning, everybody. As Lucinda said, we're very happy to be here. This issue of advocacy is a really important one. When I was reflecting on the 30 years of work in this area that I've done, I was reminded of many, many times along the way when an individual's advocacy or a group of us as advocates were really part of some incredible and positive changes that all of us then benefit from. And so we want to spend today talking about that advocacy. I know that for myself, I made both tremendous mistakes along the way, as well as having some wonderful successes with my colleagues. So we want to talk about what it means to be an advocate when you're part of an agency or a county and a peer-run organization, and how do you do that well? So that's our goal for today. Let's look at our learning objectives. The first learning objective is we want to define the steps of advocacy. And these steps come from a variety of sources, including peers and peer organizations that have done tremendous advocacy work over the years. And what we'll be looking at is what kind of conscious and intentional things do you need to really do to be the best advocate you can be. Secondly, we're going to evaluate some vignettes that we've put together with issues that I'm sure many of you have dealt with in your work or in your personal life. And we're going to look at what might the best response to those be, given what we learn about the steps of advocacy. These will be polling questions, which is one way that we hope to get your involvement in this webinar. Also that we have a lot of time left at the end, a half an hour left at the end for your questions and your comments. The third thing we're going to talk about is what are the core skills for being a change agent in terms of system change. Lucinda and I are actually currently taking a break from a training that we're in this week called the Hearing Voices Group Facilitator Training. And this is a wonderful example of new information that's really, I think, going to, and this is a movement that's occurring, the Hearing Voices movement, which is going to be a wonderful system change opportunity for us. And so we want to talk in this webinar about what kind of skills you need when you're really working on that big level change. So we'll go to the next slide. So you've been hired as consumer and family member employees, bringing your lived experience, and I'm sure every one of you has been involved in self-advocacy or advocacy for a loved one, a family member, a friend, along the way. In fact, often people come into jobs in behavioral health out of a really strong sense of social justice, of righting wrongs, and being able to make the system fairer for those that come after us. So there's a lot of ways to do that advocacy work. Now you're an employee, so you're sort of working on the inside. And when you're working on the inside, it's a different, I think it's a different ball game. It's not entirely different, and we're not, and there's just no judgment on which way you do it, whether you're an advocate from the outside or the inside. But there are some different strategies you might incorporate when you're working as an employee, and yet you see the need to advocate and push for change. We'll go to the next slide. So one of the ways I frame it in my head is that we have something that we might call activism, and then what we would call advocacy. And we have a picture up here of a person that many of you, I'm sure, know, Sally Zinman, who is just an incredible icon, I think, of both activism and advocacy, as someone who began this movement of having people with lived experience be heard and included in the conversation about what was going to happen in the mental health system. But the way I look at it is activism is the level of activism on a political issue that you can do on your own time. It's highly personal, and you know, so people have issues that they're that they are very strongly connected to. It's really the heart of the matter to them, and that can be anything from nuclear disarmament, climate change, or behavioral health. You know, how people are treated, what's the best way to help people recover. But whatever the issue is, it tends to have a highly personal edge to it. Activism is also about your opinion about things. It's strongly held views that you're very passionate about. And it includes sometimes very highly engaged political action, like demonstrations, lobbying, getting signatures, even as far as people going to jail and doing civic unrest as a way of drawing attention to something that they feel is really important for people to hear. But generally, activism at that level is done off of work time. This is in your personal life. You may have several issues that you're highly involved in and passionate about. Now, it's not to say that as employees we don't do some things on work time. We were talking and remembering last night about going to demonstrations during Mental Health Month up at the Capitol, and many of you may have been there too. So there are some ways in which, as an employee, we are politically present and we show up. But what we're talking about here, we're trying to differentiate full-on activism from the advocacy that we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about, that and how you do that kind of activism as an employee. So the next slide, please. One of the ways that I look at it is that being an effective advocate on the job is about finding some middle ground. It's about being able to navigate the middle. It's really about how to be effective over being right or calling other people wrong. It's about being effective that's not overly passive. You don't just say, oh, well, it's too big, can't do anything about that. And also you're not too aggressive. One of the things that I've certainly learned over the years is relationships matter. Relationships with everybody, even people I don't agree with. And if you're in the system, working in the system as long as I have, people do a lot of changing over 30 years. And so it's good to have a sense of goodwill among people, even though you might have very big points of view difference. One of the things that this slide also represents is that there are some advocacy issues in which there's a certain objective you're going to get. Somebody deserves to have their SSI revisited, and you make sure they get SSI as part of your advocacy work. It's done. When we talk about larger level advocacy issues, we sometimes don't see the end result in our lifetime. There have been changes that have been in process for 30 plus years that many of us have been involved in. And so what your advocacy is about moving the conversation, even maybe beginning the conversation and making incremental steps, that you want to be in it for the long haul on some of the issues that we're going to talk about. So what are the steps of advocacy? The first one, and I'm just going to review all of these quickly just so you see the overall picture of where we're going. And we're actually going to talk specifically about each of the steps. So the first one is to define the problem, or what's the issue that you want to advocate for. During defining the issue, you're also defining the goal, what it is that you want to have happen. The second step is do your research. Advocacy is a very intentional and strategic way of being in the world. And so it means information, facts, data that support your objective, the goal that you want to achieve, is really important. So you need to not just fly by the seat of your pants. Third step is to always be watching your emotional temperature. We'll talk about how to keep a cool head in difficult situations. And then brainstorming solutions. Often it's good to do brainstorming with others, either your peers or other people involved in the issue, because we want to have lots of options. We want to, for a lot of issues, there is not just one way to do it. There might be many. And then after doing that kind of brainstorming, we decide on an action plan and make a clear and very specific plan on how to proceed. So next slide, please. So defining the problem is a first step. So the individual, and this could be you, it could be someone that you're working with, or it could be a group, needs to determine what you want from the situation. What's the outcome that's desired? And we'll take one example is, say the person that you're working with is very unhappy with their doctor. They've just not felt like their doctor's really listening, or any provider, not necessarily a doctor, but that they're not being heard, or it's not working, the relationship's not working. And so that's the problem. The outcome that they want is they would like a provider that they feel better about, that they have a good relationship with. So when you're thinking about this, how to define the problem, you might ask, do I have the right? So do I have the right to asking for a different provider? Well, yes, indeed, you do. Everybody has the right of choice around their providers. The second question you might ask is, what impact will this have on others? There might be an issue in some places with how many providers are available, and what degree of choice is available because of how many people there are in the system and who's working where. Another question you might ask is, well, who's responsible for this determination? Who's involved? And often in our example about a provider, you're going to involve the provider themselves on that first. You're also going to be involved with, say, the clinic or agency administrator or somebody that works with who is assigned to whom. And so you need to, while you're defining the problem and the outcome, kind of get an idea of who's going to be at the table in this discussion. Next, you're going to want to do your research. Advocacy brings up big emotions, which we'll talk about in a minute. This is really bringing your A-game rationality to the table. So you want to ask a few questions. Is this a legal issue? Is there a law or regulations that have been set about this issue? And if so, you need to find out what those are. Is this a process that would be a grievance or a complaint? And if so, who do you lodge the complaint with? And are there formal processes to follow? One thing that won't work is complaining to the wrong people, or complaining in a way that people can dismiss you because you haven't followed the process. So getting your ducks in a row, finding out what the procedure is and being careful to follow it will help your cause. And also finding out who the right person is to approach with the matter. That's part of your research. So while it may seem like you want to go directly to the top, like the director of mental health, you've got their number on speed dial and you're calling them right now, you have to really think about that choice in terms of, is this the right place to start your advocacy? Some people do have really strong connections with mental health directors, and that could be a perfect way to go. But often, there's lines of communication, lines of authority, and being aware of what level to begin the conversation at is a really positive thing. It creates buy-in, it creates development of allies, and it's often much better to work at a lower level than straight at the top. So next we'll talk about your emotional temperature. And I think, boy, this is one, I've had experience with over my career. When I feel really passionate about something, I have to really work at calming myself before speaking, because I can be impulsive in what I say. And emotions are really good for fueling action. Anger really motivates us to do something about injustice. But you need mindfulness to be able to be heard, because otherwise your emotions actually create more problems than solutions. They have to be balanced by the knowledge and the facts that you researched and you can bring to the table. And effective really means that you're able to state things in a way that can be heard. And I know the angrier I am, the more other people shut down. And it was true with my children. If I had a really good issue, I knew I was right, and I knew my anger was justified, somehow my children heard me less when I was saying, my piece in a loud, more angry way. They checked out more instead of that being the most effective way for me to advocate for an issue in the home. So I think we want to remember that being level-headed, being calm, it's not that your emotions are bad. They're not. But they're also need to be kind of mitigated and worked with so that you're still being able to be heard. the next step is brainstorming solutions. So you've got your emotions under control, you've researched the facts, you've got a good sense of what it is that you want to have happen. And now it's really looking at what possible solutions are there to this issue. Like I mentioned before, some advocacy issues are clear-cut. Sometimes it's, the issue is access to a service. This person deserves access to a service, and it's cut and dried. There are also issues, though, that have more gray area to them, and you might need to work at some more compromising or more negotiation in order to move the conversation or get closer to your goal. So working from your strengths is one thing to consider. Writing things down for some people is a much better way of looking at the solutions than having an in-person discussion. So getting all your ideas on paper helps a lot of people to organize and communicate solutions. And this is also where an advocacy partner might be important. So when you're trying to look at possible solutions and you're meeting, say, with that provider and you want to advocate for yourself, it might be helpful to bring someone with you to support you, even if they don't say anything, just as a way of having some support while you talk about possible solutions. Also, when you're looking at solutions, this is another place where your thoughtfulness and your intentionality is so important, that you want to make sure you look at your options and what the consequences of each of them would be. So in that doctor example or provider example, say that you have, say that you really do have a long list of complaints, and that what you want to do is go in there and just, tell that person up one side, down the other, all the faults that they have and all their failings and what's not good about them. That is an option. It's one way to deal with the situation. But you want to look at, well, what happens after that? So that may be hard for the person to hear, and it may be that you're communicating in a way that is overly hurtful, or is potentially going to give you the backlash of other people's opinions about this provider. So you want to. Sometimes it's totally fine to go with that choice, but you just want to do it with intentionality and with thoughtfulness. Sometimes you have to weigh whether you want to maintain somewhat of a relationship with the person, even though you're ending a relationship. You want to end it amicably. Sometimes that's really a much better way to end things than sort of the burning bridge kind of idea. So we're going to look at, in a lot of situations, the importance of being collegial and trying to understand other people's opinions about things, even when they're very different from your own. And still moving towards the objective, the goal that you want, but really always weighing the consequences of your choices and actions. And then we go to the next one. The final step is just deciding on an action plan. If you're working with a group of people, different people may have different responsibilities and roles. If you're advocating for yourself, you want to set a date and a time to do it. Same with working with others. You also want to document what you do. In advocacy, along with many other parts of our job, maybe, and our lives, we want to create a record. So I know when I've talked to SSI people, that, and actually had trainings from SSI people, they tell you, take names. Take names, write down dates, who'd you talk to on the phone, what day. Get that basic information because, and make copies of everything. You want to be able to have a good record of your steps to advocate on your own behalf or on the behalf of others. And it's very useful. More than once, it's come in very, very handy to have done good documentation in an advocacy arena. You also want to follow up. And if you don't get a response the first time, be willing to try again. Advocates are not, their advocacy is not for the, for people who like things to always happen fast and the first time. It's just much more long-term. If anyone had told me this at 23 when I got into the field, I don't think I believed that. I really believed things changed and, you know, quickly. And you can get very disheartened early if that's the belief system you come in with. I think it's good to always be talking to your elders in the community and get a sense of the history, and also just be willing to try again. That, you know, SSI rejects people every single time, 60% of the time, their first thing, and lots of situations are like that. So follow up, do it again, find an appeal, and keep working it. And that's really part of your action plan. So we're going to talk about the types of advocacy. Each one we're going to give some examples of, and this is where our polling questions will come in. So we're going to talk about advocating for yourself. As an employee, there's going to be situations that come up around your own job and your own situation that you need to advocate for yourself. Most commonly, you're advocating for others. The people that you work with will have housing needs, provider needs, all sorts of issues that come up, criminal justice situations, and your role as an advocate is going to be crucial. Then we also have the advocacy for system change that's vital. And if there's one thing, just by your presence in our system, peer providers are part of system change, just being here with us. And beyond that presence and the change that can happen by your presence, there's more for all of us to push for so that we can be a better system and help more people in their recovery. So I have one more slide before I turn it over to Lucinda. And the first one we're going to talk about is self-advocacy. And here, Lucinda and I have worked with peers for many, many years and done a lot of training for peers. Currently, I'm working with the Superior region, so way far north California, and helping to train a group of peer providers up there. And in our experience doing that kind of work, these are very common issues that we're going to talk about here for peers. Your job description is unclear. That's one common issue. People might even say, what? I have a job description? Really? It might not have been something anybody's ever shown you. Your role on the team might be underutilizing your peer expertise. We find that people get directed to do more clerical tasks than what they thought they were going to be doing is really one-on-one or groups of people. You might have difficulty finding time to meet with your supervisor. And believe me, you're not alone. Probably anybody who works in mental health and behavioral health is having trouble finding time to meet with their supervisor. They tend to be very overburdened, busy people. However, how do you advocate for getting some time? That's really important for your growth and development. And finally, you might have too many people giving you things to do. So it seems like I don't have just one boss. I have like 16 bosses. And that has to do with confusion about your role. And so how do you advocate around that? What do you do? So some of these issues may sound familiar to you. And what I'm going to do is turn the presentation over now to Lucinda to work with some of these issues.
Thank you, Deb. What you see on your screen is one of the scenarios that actually occurs quite frequently. And I'm just going to read the scenario and then read the potential answers, and then Kelly will help you do the poll. So Sierra has been on the job at the downtown clinic for 2 months. Several social workers have been asking her to do clerical support tasks, such as making copies. She wants to help out and be part of the team, but she is frustrated that she hasn't been able to work with clients or family members. Now, there are a number of ways that you can go about dealing with this situation. And on the next slide, we've offered up some suggestions, and we're going to ask you to choose the best answer. So one, you're going to politely tell the social workers to stop giving you clerical tasks. Or she's going to just be patient, and she's going to assume that she'll probably be seeing clients within the next few months. Another option is she's going to voice her concerns to her friends and tell them what a bad job this is, and she's just might not even want to stay in this job. The fourth option is she's going to schedule a meeting with her supervisor to discuss her job role. And Kelly, if you want to go ahead and put the polling question up. Hello, Kelly.
I think that the audience can see it.
Oh, the audience can. Okay, great. Thank you.
They're voting right now.
Okay.
So the audience chose 100% number 4. Schedule a meeting with her supervisor.
Excellent. That, of course, is the correct answer. Although I have to tell you that we have seen all of the options being used. The most effective, however, is when advocating for yourself is to schedule a meeting with your supervisor. And we're going to use this example in the next set of slides to explore the steps of advocacy. If you could go to the next slide, please. And I can't see the next slide, but I'm wondering if it's up.
The steps of advocacy slide is up.
Okay. So the first step is to help Sierra define the problem. So clearly the problem was a lack of clarity about her job role. And her main concern was that she wasn't working with clients, and I think peer providers are generally under the assumption that they're going to be working with peers when they're hired. To help Sierra define the issue, she could have created a list of tasks that she's been doing to share with her supervisor. So she's defining the problem. She's explaining to the supervisor, this is what I've been doing, and this is the problem. The next in the advocacy step is the research step, which is perhaps Sierra can look for job descriptions from other locations, find examples of job descriptions. And this could be very important in helping the supervisor to identify appropriate job roles. Part of the brainstorming that she could do with her supervisor or a peer group, and we absolutely recommend that peer supporters have consultation groups with other peer supporters so that they have a place to take work issues to explore how those work issues are affecting their job. So Sierra might take this issue to a consultation group, and they might brainstorm how to get Sierra to be moved into a way that she's actually having the experience of working with peers versus doing clerical work. Then you want to actually manage your emotional temperature around this issue. So before meeting with your supervisor, it may be really important to use some relaxation techniques. Do some deep breathing, go for a walk, whatever it is that you do to calm yourself so that when you're in the meeting, you can present, here's the issue, here's what I'd like to see as a solution, and to go about it in a way that helps the supervisor help you. And then in terms of using this step for the action plan, so you're going to want to schedule a meeting. Sarah's going to want to schedule a meeting with her supervisor. She's going to ask for a date and a time. And then during that meeting, it's very important that supervisors are very, very busy. They have many people that they are supervising and many responsibilities that as long staff sometimes we don't recognize. A lot of times our supervisors are required to go to meetings all day long outside of the clinic. And so it's very important that you make an action plan that includes scheduling time. And that will help your supervisor to be prepared as well. And then during that action plan phase, she's going to ask the supervisor to work with her on identifying how she can begin to work with consumers or peers. And the other step that may be necessary in this situation is to request that the supervisor clarify with coworkers what their job is. This is actually tremendously helpful because oftentimes peer providers come into the workforce and the existing workforce has no idea what your role is. And so they're just filling a void. But to request that the supervisor clarify the role is a reasonable request and one that will help everybody on the team. So looking at the next slide, which is advocating for others, we want to just go ahead and give some examples. So you may be working with somebody that doesn't like the food at their board and care home. They may have, this person that you're working with may want to go to work, but they have been denied services from the Department of Rehabilitation. If you're working in the children's system, you may have a parent who doesn't agree with the school's IEP, which is an individualized educational plan. You may have a family member that's frustrated because the doctor has added a medication that's been unhelpful in the past, and that family member knows what works well and has not had an opportunity to let the doctor know that. So on the next slide is scenario number 2. And this is about a family who has a minor child. So Mr. and Mrs. Sanchez are very unhappy with the recent IEP meeting with the school. They do not believe that their child is receiving enough support for his ADHD, his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And last year, he had a personal attendant to help him stay on task, and that was a very successful strategy. This year, however, he's only receiving behavioral prompts from the teacher. And the next slide is a set of responses, and we're going to ask you with the polling question to choose the best response. And I will go ahead and read those responses. The first is to call the principal and report the resource specialist. The second would be to tell the family to request that their child be placed in another classroom. The third is to advise the family to refuse to send the child to school without the attendant being reinstated. And the fourth is to meet with the family to brainstorm possible options. And Kelly, you can go ahead and open the poll. Okay, let's go ahead and reconnect. Kelly? Okay, we need to just go back.
The poll has been launched.
Okay, so on our end, just to let you know, we're not seeing the slides advancing.
Okay. Well, I'm closing the polls now, and we have 100% say 4. Meet with the family to brainstorm possible options.
Absolutely. So this is really important, and we're going to talk about these next, is you as an advocate really are, when you're working on behalf of somebody else, you're helping that person first to advocate for themselves, right? So you're not calling anybody, you're not telling the family what to do, you're not even advising the family. So, and we're going to go in, so obviously meeting with the family to brainstorm possible options is the, the correct answer on many levels, but the primary level is that you as a helper, as an advocate, want to make sure that the family, or in the case of an adult, the individual themselves is doing as much of their own advocacy as possible. So on the next slide, or this slide, we're going to, it's really important to know the essential areas in which you're going to be working when you're advocating on behalf of others. So you want to partner with your consumer or family member so that you are working with them and they are being as self-directed as possible. You provide support as an advocate, and you encourage self-advocacy wherever possible because we want to empower people, not to disempower them. And that also means that we're following the lead of the client and family member. And sometimes this can be very challenging because we may have an idea of how things ought to work, but that can be in conflict with what the client or family really want. And so we have to respect that and help them get their needs met, whether we agree that that's the best possible thing for them. And then your role is to help them clearly define their needs and goals in the situation. And go to the next slide, please. So you're also going to keep an open mind, which means you're going to be talking with the consumer family member, and with permission, and this is really important, you need to get permission to speak to others involved. So, for example, the family member may say, no, I don't want you to call the teacher or the attendant. That would be harmful to our relationship. On the other hand, they may say, no, please do, will you please call the resource teacher or the attendant to find out, to get some specific piece of information. So, but the point here is to always have permission. And of course, if you are going to be giving information, you need to have that in writing, right? You need to have a written evidence that you are okay to do that. So you're going to be also non-judgmental, empathetic, and kind to all people involved. And this is, it sounds obvious, But when you're in the middle of an emotional situation and you're triggered, so for example, I have a son who receives IEPs, and I could easily become quite emotional and distressed on behalf of somebody else that I'm advocating for because of my own negative experiences or difficult experiences with school meetings. So it's important to remember that everybody really is trying to do their best, and that kindness and empathy takes you a long way in your advocacy efforts. It's also really important to know the facts before taking any action. I recall on more than one occasion in my early career getting half of the facts and then going into people's offices and, you know, declaring strongly how things were going to have to be and this is what was going to happen, only to have to go back later to say, oh my goodness, I didn't know this very important piece of information. And I realize now that I acted way too fast, and not only that, I said things that weren't even accurate. So sometimes the people that we're working with can come to us with information, and it may not be the full information. And so we need to be able to ask good questions, thorough questions, and make sure that we have all of the information before we begin on a path of advocacy. If you have a question or concern about an advocacy issue, it's always good to check it out with your supervisor. So if you are nervous that you may not have all the information, or you are nervous that around speaking with other professionals outside of the mental health or behavioral health system, check that out with your supervisor. It's always better to err on the side of caution than it is to rush in and not be real clear on what's happening. So check it out with your supervisor. And next, we are looking at respecting confidentiality. People come to us and they assume, and they should assume, that we respect their confidentiality and that we're very careful around who knows what's going on in our conversations. Of course, we know there are limits to that confidentiality when it comes to danger to self or others, or when children are being potentially harmed, but we need to respect our oath of confidentiality. And part of that is obtaining authorization, which we talked a little bit before. If you're going to be speaking to others on behalf of the client or family, you need to get that authorization form in writing and with signatures. And again, when you're advocating on behalf of others, we've touched briefly on this, it's important to understand that your opinions are secondary to the wishes of the consumer or family member. People don't always make the same choices that we would make, and that's okay. So our job really is to educate, inform, problem solve, brainstorm, get them a book, have them see a webinar, anything that you can do to provide information. But ultimately, the decision rests with the individual. And it's really important that we respect that decision, especially when we know that we bring in our own biases, our own cultural and ethnic backgrounds that may be very different. Our worldview may be very different than those of the people that we're working for and with, and so we need to be respectful of that. And so if we can go to the advocacy for system change slide. Okay. So as Debbie was saying earlier, just being present in the workforce, peer providers are acting as change agents and paving the way for system change. And this can't be underestimated how important it is to have peer and family member providers at the table. This in itself is changing the system. However, it is not the end of the change. We have to actually strategically be incorporating peers and family members in a meaningful way. And that may take a little longer. And that's one of the things that we've seen over many, many years is that hiring is just the first phase. The next phase, of course, is being fully integrated, having an equal voice, being able to impact decision-making at higher levels in the organization. And so what we see is that frequently, but not always, there's a disconnect between a recovery and resiliency-oriented system and what we actually see being delivered in our work site. And this can be very this can be very upsetting to peer providers, and in fact can be emotionally harmful if we don't recognize that there is a disconnect between the values that we've been taught as peer providers and then what we actually see in practice. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody else is bad and they're doing the wrong thing, because we come from a place that existing providers are doing the best they can with the knowledge that they have, but it does mean that there is going to be some strain that you may experience. And so we're going to go to the next slide, please. So I think I want to talk about your role in system change. Before we get to the resources slide, thank you. So if you run up against this situation, it's important to identify in your work environment and who are like-minded people, who is already in the environment that gets where you're coming from, right? And this helps us stay positive so that we look for people that we can identify with and talk with to keep us in a positive frame and moving forward. We also, though, need to be willing to respectfully listen to others that disagree with us. This is not, system change is not easy. It does require conversation, and it does require hanging in with people who disagree with you. The last thing you're going to need to do is or one of the other things you're going to need to do is to be a clear, persistent, and professional voice at the table. This is sometimes hard to do, and when you're in a change agent role by virtue of being new and holding different values, it can be difficult. And some of the ways that you can do this are on your team, reminding people of what the recovery and resiliency values are. You can bring up issues of welcoming. Does the workplace feel welcoming to you and to the individuals who are utilizing the service? Do people have timely access to services? Do you notice that people are receiving the level of service that they're requesting? And one of the other really important roles that we can play as peer providers is holding the hope that all persons receiving the services are capable of recovery and wellness. So your role is an important one, and one that is complicated because of the change that we're all involved in the behavioral health care system. And the next slide, please. So we're going to also, as peer providers, point out the positive things that we see. You know, when the clinic decides we're going to put up artwork, client artwork on the walls to make the environment more inviting, that's a great thing, and we as change agents need to point those things out. While at the same time, we can be continuing to point out what are those things that still need to be done to increase our level of recovery and resiliency values in the workplace. And the other thing is, when you're advocating for system change, is you want to be able to ask for what you want and to describe the change you wish to see. So this, for example, is one of the things that peer providers find often is, especially when they're joining team meetings, is that the language is not person-first language. So we're in clinic meetings, we're still talking about schizophrenics, we're still talking about bad parents, we're still talking in a way that is shorthand for people, but is, if other people are in the room, can feel very dehumanizing. And so, for example, we might say to our supervisor, or even in a staff meeting, we might say, you know, I'm really uncomfortable with this kind of language, and I would like to introduce to you person-first language, and can we agree that we're going to use that? That is a very soft and respectful way of asking for the change that you want to see. And the next slide, we just wanted to give you some resources. I'm sorry, Kelly, it would be the resources slide. Wanted to be able to give you some resources. CAMPRO is the California Association of Mental Health peer-run organizations. Peer-run organizations can join CAMPRO as well as individuals. And this is the statewide organization that advocates on behalf of individuals managing a mental health challenge. INAP is the International Association of Peer Supporters, Peer Specialists. And this is the national and international organization that holds the values, and they've recently come out with a statement around what are the job roles of peer providers. So you can go to their website and get a lot of information about peer providers, and they actually do advocacy work. And if you notice their website, we transposed some of the letters, so it's actually www.inaops, and we apologize for that. And the other one that we wanted to put on there for you was the Bay Area Hearing Voices Network. This is a group of folks who have the experience of voice hearing and or other extraordinary experiences, and they're looking at alternative ways of understanding that experience and being with people who are having that experience. And this is a new, in California anyway, a new way of being with somebody who is having extraordinary experiences that other people aren't having. And so I think this is a really good resource for peer providers as well. And at this point, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Lisa. I think we're ready to ask for questions and comments.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and have a little time now for anybody to have any questions or comments that you have about the presentation. If you can use the comments box on your screen there to go ahead and type them in. And while we're giving you a few minutes to type in any questions or any comments for the presenters, Kelly, can you advance to the next slide? I wanted to tell you a little bit about the upcoming trainings that we have, so you can make sure and get them on your calendar, tell other people that you work with that could benefit from them about what's coming up. So our next training is actually an in-person training. That's going to be coming up for the folks in Napa County. We're going to be doing February 25th, Napa County Health and Human Services Agency, the old Sonoma Road site. And this is going to be on the topic of educational career ladders and pathways for success. Now, for the folks in Solano and Contra Costa County, we're going to be on February 26th at the Pleasant Hill Community Center. So again, Sonoma and Napa County, February 25th at the Napa County Health and Human Services Agency. And for folks in Solano and Contra Costa County, it's at the Pleasant Hill Community Center on the 26th, the following day. And again, we had a webinar earlier in the beginning of our PLI project on career paths and sort of educational things that you could do to advance your career. This is going to be an in-person training that's going to delve really a lot more depth about the different educational paths, how to get there, how to get onto these different career ladders, and really provide some more deep information for folks who are interested in doing that. Then our next webinar that we have coming up is actually for the leadership. So these are folks that supervise peers, that run organizations that hire peers, and this one's going to be all about supervision and peers. How does it differ? Does it differ? What are the things that you need to keep in mind? What are the best practices that people are using out there that have peers in their organization from the perspective of the supervisor? So that one is going to be on March 3rd, and the registration link are going to be sent out to the PLI members. So for those of you on this webinar, please tell your supervisors about it. Tell the folks that are running your organization about it, that we want to provide the support and information for them as well as part of the Peer Leadership Institute. So those are the next trainings that we have coming up. We're going to check back in now for questions and comments. Kelly's going to read out any that we've got. Feel free to keep adding them as we're talking here. And then our presenters are going to answer. So go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, everyone. I don't have any questions as of yet from the audience. So if you are trying to figure out where to write your questions, it's in the question box, which will be on your on the webinar, the GoToWebinar panel. So you'll see that there is a question box. You just go ahead and click on that, and you can type your question right in there. I'd also like to remind everyone, if you are viewing this webinar as a group, to please type the names of the people that are also viewing the webinar with you so you can get credit. We have our graduation coming up on May 12th and 13th, and I want to make sure everyone who views the webinars will get credit at the graduation ceremony. So thanks a lot. And we'll wait just a few more minutes if anybody has any questions.
And for those of you guys who didn't hear it at the beginning of the presentation, the handouts of today are available for download. If you go to your control panel, just beneath the area that says questions, there's one that says handouts. You can click on the link that says effective advocacy as an employee.pdf, and that will give you a copy of all of the slides today. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, you should be typing those in now in the questions and comments section. And we will be sending out notifications about our next webinar and our next live training that we're going to have coming up. So we're going to wait here just one more minute to see if any last questions come in before we wrap up our presentation today. All right, Kelly, any questions?
No questions from our audience.
Okay. Well, as always, you can always follow up with an email to Kelly if some questions come to mind afterwards that you'd like to forward on to the presenters. But with that, we're going to go ahead and close up our presentation for today, and we thank very much our guest speakers from CASRA for going over this information with us. This presentation will be available on the web. Again, that's at www.mentalhealthworkforce.org/ PLI if you would like to view this at a later time. Thank you again for attending.
Thank you, everybody.